Hello, 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 hello. So, this is the final video, I promise, of Triple BBBEE. And in this final video, we will be basically looking at the verdict, policy failures, lessons learned, and recommendations about Triple BBBEE. Because, just as a reminder, I'm just interested in two things. Does it bring down the Gini coefficient, the Gini coefficient? Does it reduce inequality? And does it encourage foreign investment? That's all I'm interested in. So let's continue. So, policy design versus implementation gap. One of the central failures of Triple BBBEE has been the growing divergence between policy design and implementation realities. While the legislative framework, particularly the 2003 Triple BBBEE Act and the Codes of Good Practice, is well developed, its application has been marked by inconsistencies, loopholes, and manipulation. So it was done, it was done with the best of intentions. And then when implementation came, they just basically found that it's not working as well. And they were not quick or proactive enough, government, the ANC, proactive enough. They were not proactive enough in dealing with this. And remember, this comes over a very, very long time. So, before Triple BBBEE, you had BBBEE. So we're talking here about, 3 years or something. So they have had a very long time to fix this, and they haven't done so. I feel it's similar to affirmative action and, cadre deployment. I believe there may be a correlation between affirmative action and cadre deployment, where, affirmative action then is obviously being then abused for it, because affirmative action should be used in a building capacity. However, give something in the hands of a politician and it becomes politicians are a very special class of people, type of people. But that's the problem. And then with Triple BBBEE, you had these inconsistencies, the loopholes, and the manipulation. So, to underline this, Shai, Molafinyana, and Kino in their 2019 paper emphasized the lack of summative evaluations and impact assessments as a critical design flaw. Without reliable, independent data on long-term outcomes, it is difficult to measure progress or recalibrate strategy. Most assessments rely on input indicators like ownership percentage, procurement scores, rather than the outcome indicators such as job creation, poverty reduction, or intergenerational mobility. Furthermore, as Irene in 2017 said, and Kruer in 2011, many firms engage in tick box compliance, viewing Triple BBBEE as an administrative hurdle rather than transformation strategy. This reduces the incentive for deep engagement with empowerment objectives and fosters a culture of minimal effort. So, you find these, I've heard it from business people quite often, you have to do all of these things, and it is, if it was only Triple BBBEE, if this was the only legislative or regulatory barrier that South African business people faced, maybe it could have been, acceptable, but it's not. There's many regulations and regulatory barriers in South Africa. That's why East Africa is doing better than us. It's way easier. It takes months. I said it in another video. It takes months to open a company in South Africa, whereas it takes like a day to do it in Rwanda. So you see, this is a barrier, and then essentially what you want, the job creation, poverty reduction, and intergenerational mobility, or as I always like to say, breaking the cycle of poverty. These things can't be done. And remember, this is why we have BBBEE. This is why we have affirmative action. I don't really like mentioning affirmative action and BBBEE in the same sentence because they're not quite the same thing. Like legally, if you just go and look at the law, they're not quite the same thing. It's meant for different. It has different impacts. So just bear that in mind. So then you get fronting, elite capture, and reputational risk. A widely acknowledged shortcoming in the prevalence of fronting, the fraudulent misinterpretation of black ownership or management to gain preferential access to state contracts. Despite the 2013 Amendment Act introducing criminal penalties for fronting, enforcement remains weak and detection mechanisms are underdeveloped. Fronting is not only distorting BBBEE, but delegitimizes empowerment efforts in the eyes of the broader public. It reinforces the perception that the policy benefits a politically connected elite while excluding the broader black population. As Goga and Mondliwa in their 2021 paper argues, this is a contribution to public cynicism and waning trust in the transformational capacity of the state. So, yeah, this is the problem. It basically benefits only a few people. It is not a socialist system. It's not like a anti-class system or a class alleviation system. It's only meant, or currently, practically, it only benefits a few. And since they have had so much time to fix this, I am pretty negative in the sense that why will they get it right in the next year? You can't give them another 5 years because South Africa's got serious economic problems. So why will they fix it within the next year? It doesn't, I don't think they'll be able to do it. Moreover, BBBEE has been vulnerable to elite capture, whereby politically well-positioned individuals and corporates have secured lucrative deals, often through equity transfers with limited operational involvement. This has led to high-profile scandals and undermines the credibility of empowerment initiatives. I want to do a video about this because I believe there's many different facets of corruption in South Africa, many different kinds of corruption. South Africa is like the ecosystem of corruption. It's like the Amazon forest of corruption, and you get different species in the Amazon of creatures and plants, like exactly the same way you get different kinds of corruption in South Africa. And yeah, it's really taxing us now. Weak institutional coordination. Another major challenge has been institutional fragmentation. Various departments, including the DTIC, National Treasury, and sector regulators, implement empowerment strategies in parallel but with limited coordination. Sector charters often diverge from generic codes, creating confusion amongst stakeholders and inconsistencies in scoring. The BBBEE Commission, while empowered to investigate violations, suffer from resource and capacity constraints. Its role has often been reactive rather than proactive, focusing more on complaints than systemic oversight. The lack of a unified national monitoring dashboard limits transparency and hinders policy learning. So this is like also typically South African, is that there are bodies who are supposed to regulate or police these things, but they have been weakened so much politically that it's, they can't do their job. And they've been weakened politically, specifically by politicians who want to promote state capture, in other words, like just taking over the bank accounts of large areas of the state that's profitable. And they just want their time to feed. It's not their time to feed, like the previous administration is out now, this administration is in. And I am very concerned that this may be like a once every 5-year thing where we get a new administration and they are just now going to look for other ways to exploit the system because they're jealous of the wealth that the previous government amassed for themselves in their personal capacity. You should have a look at, there's definitely this Oshkari behavior where essentially you get people who just want to drive BMWs, they want to go to the best clubs in South Africa. South Africa's got some pretty good clubs, by the way. They want to drink the most expensive whiskey, they want to stay in a double or a triple story mansion in a security state, they want to drive a Porsche, a Maserati, and a limousine, these kinds of things, obviously wear Italian clothes. This conspicuous consumption, actually that's a good thing in the sense that that's how the police and the revenue services capture them. It's just they live these lives instead of, this is the sad thing about South Africa is these criminals aren't even, smart, they're not even creative, they're just stupid. If you look, okay, this is a silly example, but the TV series Breaking Bad, the Walter White Heisenberg character, he doesn't really have a conspicuous lifestyle. He basically, his wife got angry when he bought a car for himself, but then I think his dodgy lawyer, and his wife convinces him just hide the money. Later, when you have amassed enough wealth, you can retire, go to some island where they can't transfer you back to the United States and spend your money there. But these South African political class and economic class criminals are so greedy that they spend it now. And this is another reason why people are so resentful, is that it's so obvious. You see these people everywhere. You figure it out pretty quickly because, these are celebrity people. If you are a owner of a 1,000 employee strong company that's worth 1 billion rand or whatever, and you just, people will then know who you are, at least the LinkedIn community and, some suppliers and buyers and what have you. And then when, they see you, they will start gossiping and you'll become the talk of the town. So this is also just like, very dismaying, is how stupid the South African political class are, in the sense that, they don't even know how to hide their dishonest behavior and their, conspicuous consumption, which is shocking. So at least, you failed, and then you can learn some lessons from this. So from the South African experience, for any other country, by the way, who wants to have a native wealth transfer, there's several lessons. Empowerment must be tied to productive capability development. Empowerment without productivity risks becoming symbolic. Long-term success depends on enabling black-owned firms to compete, innovate, and scale within high-value sectors. This requires targeted support in the form of financing, skills development, and technological transfer. So, this is what I said in a previous video about farming, is as long as something is productive, it doesn't really matter who owns it. What's that guy? Was it Deng Xiaoping who said the cat, it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. So I find this to be very true. And this is where I feel that, whatever happens, the economy should always move forward. It should, or if it's not growing, there should be some marginal growth, and it should be at least, it should at least be effective. Goods should be made, manufactured and sold. There has to be movement, in the system. Next, transformation is not just about ownership, but control and value creation. Simply transferring equity shares does not ensure transformation. Effective empowerment demands meaningful participation in decision-making, strategic planning, and operational leadership. So, this is where, this may sound kind of silly, but this is where meaning of life, or finding meaning in life for me comes in. Is that, and I'm now assuming we're not talking about a rotten apple, but let's say a beneficiary of BBBEE is being helped. It doesn't help if you just give him some some farcical, face value job where he sits in a boardroom, but he doesn't have any power, or he's got power over a very small department, or a insignificant department, or if he has he or she, they should have control. So they should be able to apply their creativity. Hopefully they will have some, and they should be able to use that creativity to add value. If this is true, BBBEE also becomes much more palatable. Because then you can say, we are basically sharing the economy, and it's actually getting better. So, this is one thing that you should focus on as well, is actual control, value creation, and meaningful participation. You don't want a guy just rocking up at the office at 8 and then go and sit in his office, and no one gives him any work or asks him any questions, or bring him into a meeting, and the guy just sits there, and this mind-numbing job where he as the super high position, but he doesn't get to do anything. Next, institutional integrity and enforcement are essential. Without robust verification and accountability mechanisms, the system becomes susceptible to abuse. Transparency, public reporting, and real-time data tools are needed to strengthen oversight. So yeah, this is like the police. South Africa needs policing, like government policing organizations, seeing if everything gets done, if the system functions, and then policing organizations policing those police, and then the police policing the police that polices the police. Like that's because that's just how corrupt we are, and the control of these institutions, or like not the control, like rather the ownership, rather, or the main position should then go to, let's say, opposing political parties, so that these parties will always be able to hold one another to account, so that they can, be a balance. Next, inclusion must go beyond race to incorporate gender, geography, and class. Women, rural entrepreneurs, and township-based enterprises have not benefited proportionately. Empowerment policy must address intersectional exclusions and prioritize grassroots entrepreneurship alongside formal sector reforms. So, yeah, this is for me how BBBEE should work. It should be class-based. It should bring in, like, let's say, rural people who have been marginalized, and women, and then specifically grassroots entrepreneurship, like basically your informal economy, your basically hustlers, which is a positive thing because these people already know how to make money. So, it's a nano business, I know, but like they do know how to make money. BBBEE should look at these things. It should be more of a socialist-based system with the ideas of lowering the Gini coefficient, that making, a lot of black industrialists. I said it in the previous video, I'm saying it again, because trickle-down economics don't work. And apart from the incompetence and corruption that has plagued BBBEE, is I think that the focus has been on trickle-down economics, the idea that this may work, and, well, it doesn't. It never had. Industrial policy must be aligned with empowerment goals. BBBEE cannot succeed in a vacuum. It must be embedded within a coherent industrial strategy that supports domestic production, local procurement, and value chain development. So value chains, also very important to bring that in. And this is where, a lot of people talk about beneficiation and stuff like that, beneficiation of minerals, but there's many value chains like you can add, like marketing is part of the value chain, human resources is part of the value chain, like giving a client or someone a strategy and a tactic to introduce your product into his or her market, that's value addition. So, if you can bring these things also into BBBEE, it will be it will help it'll help the cause of BBBEE. People will be less negative about it. So then we obviously need a new kind of BBBEE. Like we're going to continue with BBBEE, we will need a new one. Like right now, I'm not saying whether we should keep or reject it. I'm just saying if we keep it, there should be reforms, or rather more than reforms, a new design. Like basically scrap the structure and the model or the system we have now and create a new one. So basically reform the scorecard system, okay? Like the thing that says like whether you're like, the tick box thingy. Simplify and standardize the BBBEE scorecard to reduce administrative burden. Shift emphasis from ownership metrics to enterprise development, local production, and employment outcomes. Introduce graduated thresholds for SMEs, enabling participation without excessive compliance costs. Strengthen monitoring and impact evaluation. So establish a national BBBEE performance dashboard with real-time data and ownership, procurement and employment trends. So this is where you can use basically just IT, like if you can somehow, actually if you can tap the data or, like tap someone's phone, but yeah, well, like why not? Like you bring in a law stipulating that all business can only be done by a business phone, using on your business phone. No business communications are allowed outside of it. This is idea I'll explore in a different video, but then like this phone you can monitor, and you can use this like for your BBBEE, for your BBBEE information. And with AI and stuff, you can get quite a couple of interesting metrics out of this, like by just viewing, how people work. If the cell phone idea doesn't work, just tap the national towers, like intercept the data, coming from, so the cell phone numbers of the people registered to businesses. Look, I know how it sounds like, police state, but you also get the people, you all you do is you make the people running the system, you make them sign a lot of NDAs and stuff like that. Make sure you get some ethical people there so that they don't just spy on the people or blackmail them for whatever. But to just capture data. It's a data capturing device for streamlining the system, no more. Because like a lot of business people are also just not, and it's because of like all this complications around the BBBEE. Like it's not like the free end of the market. Okay, it's not working out perfectly. So there's a lot of red tape and complication, and if you use total data capturing with AI, then at least you can get some useful data that you can use. You can see, like, okay, this BBBEE thing over here, this company, they sold like this amount of goods, and only spent this amount of money. And this is like the, how much they spent on creating their inventory. So this is a highly profitable company. Like, we shouldn't interfere. And if they ask for help, any kind of help, like loans or whatever, we can give a bank documents, like ABSA, for example. Well, does ABSA stand for Amalgamated Banks of South Africa? Give them data, like, yeah, this company over here, this BBBEE company, they're doing well. Like, so help them, like, and the converse is true. If you see this guy has some weird behavior, like he's got like big entertainment accounts, he claims back weird stuff like for his tax, then you tell the banks, well, be careful with this guy. Like, you can give him a loan, but start with a small loan because we don't trust him. Conduct independent periodic impact assessments, including counterfactual analysis. Make verification agencies more accountable and transparent, with public access to audit findings. Yeah, this is a big thing for me, is that the public doesn't get enough say in South Africa. There's not, a lot of things are being hidden from the public, and that's why the South African public are usually so upset, is that a lot of stuff's being hidden, and it feels for them, the public, that they're being screwed over. Rightfully so, so make things transparent, and then there will be a higher probability of people accepting this stuff. Make tenders, all tenders should be transparent. When a company tenders, you should know everyone, each owner of that company. You should know who they are. You should be able to see their LinkedIn profile. You should be able to see their high school certificate, all of this stuff. Like, okay, you can maybe redact their, ID number or whatever, but there can be a secondary ID number. Okay, like a person like John Smith can have a secondary ID number. I'm saying, like, obviously you can't give someone your ID number because we are talking about South Africa after all. And fraud can happen, or someone can be attacked if their ID is leaked. But if you give them a second, like, ID, just like identification number showing that, okay, this is John Smith, he went to, like, Wits University, this is like his the scores he got for his subjects. Make everything available, and you will see how, if the ANC does this, you will see how quickly trust returns to the government. Then, institutional integration and governance reform. Improve interdepartmental coordination through centralized BBBEE Council with cross-sector representation. Empower the BBBEE Commission with expanded investigatory and enforcement powers. Standardize the sector charter under one legal framework to reduce complexity. Next, target support for black industrialists and entrepreneurs. Scale black industrialist program, expanding access to finance, technology apps, and export markets. So it may have seemed that I said, like, a lot of bad stuff against black industrialists, but because of trickle-down economics, but you do get good ones. Let's not, comb all people with the same brush. And because you will get someone who's like a Elon Musk or, a Patrice Motsepe, and the guy's really good at what he does. So if you can identify such people, then you can, let's say, help them with technical information, and, well, maybe recommend them for finance and give them access to technology. So this can also be beneficial if you give them these soft power tools. Then it may actually make the entire program more equitable, because then you don't need this hard power, this hard force of money or tenders to fix the system. Create an incubation program in rural and township economies linked to local procurement quotas. So once again, the rural areas, slum areas, these should be brought into the economy. You should have logistics there. There should be not necessarily state-run. I've got so little like trust in the state, but enable larger entrepreneurs to move into these areas, give them security, either by extra police or preferably the army, and use army logistics as well, and then help the people of the township to, let's say, get their goods to the industrialists. So instead of like creating a factory in the city where all these people need to go, like see what you can make locally, like right there. And also you don't necessarily need to make a factory, just, people are resourceful. Just tell the guy, John, like go and make me like this, I don't know, go and make me a water bottle. And then the guy will probably be able to do that, and he can come back, and it may not be 100% of what you wanted, but if it's 85%, you should never go for the Six Sigma thing where you make something too good. Just, sometimes, 80% is good enough. Like, and then this thing you can use, so try to create logistics hubs and small, task centers in rural areas and in the slums. Introduce performance-based grants and tax incentives tied to job creation, skills training, and local sourcing. So, also you need then obviously incentives, like for people to do these positive things. Like, if we are going to have industrialists, then at least force them, using tax, force them, tax incentives to enlarge the amount of people that they hire. If you can do that, that may be very beneficial, because I have done so many videos about the unemployment in South Africa. It's not funny. So if you can do these things, it can be very beneficial. Next, integrate BBBEE with a renewed industrial policy. Link empowerment with strategic sectors in green energy, agro-processing, digital infrastructure, and manufacturing. Use public procurement not just as a reward mechanism, but as a developmental tool to grow new firms and clusters. Promote inclusive value chains, ensuring that black producers are integrated into the higher value segments, not just a low margin supply. So, basically hire black, buy black, these kinds of things. Like, if you can do this, it's a form of trickle-down economics where at least you identify, let's say, formerly disadvantaged people, and you send some, you throw them a bone, help them out. And also in this, you should rely more on technology. Like, I think, South Africa basically has, we are too old-fashioned, I think, in many ways. So another thing that should be taken into account is, we spoke now about ways we can make it work, but what does it mean? What does it mean, like, for BBBEE to will basically the structure of the economy change or improve? Will it, stimulate the economy? Triple BE alone cannot stimulate economic growth. It can't. It's not like a pure growth policy. It operates within a stagnant, oligopolistic economy. So there's many oligopolies in South Africa, like telecoms, for example, like MTN, Vodacom, Cell C. We are beholden to these companies. If they tell you, okay, your contract changes like this, I had so many fights with like telecoms companies. Like, there's very little you can do. And the same with the banks. The banks are, bank charges. Like, those of you who are South African will know, bank charges are insane. Like, so this is, another problem with the South African economy. Compliance often adds costs without boosting productivity, especially for SMEs. And empowerment benefits are concentrated in elites, with minimal spillover to job creation or inclusive entrepreneurship. So it's basically the structure that is in many. It's both its own design, like it's both the Triple BE design and just the structure of the economy, the structure of the South African economy as it is, that interact upon one another. And then you also see all of these strange things happening because, the South African economy is also very broken in many ways. So, final verdict. We have basically investment and economic growth. That's what we spoke about. Like, this is the two things what I'm measuring Triple BE against. I know there's obviously I don't know how many there are, like 2, 3, 4 dozens of parameters, but I'm just interested in these two because there's so much information available about the subject. So I decided to try to simplify it. Ironically enough, this is the 5th video, so maybe I've completely failed. With regards to investment, there are, mixed outcomes. Gains access to contracts and investor legitimacy, but offset by compliance costs and risks of deterring foreign capital. Economic growth, limited. Redistribution is visible, but transformative growth remains elusive due to structural bottlenecks and limited productivity effects. So, essentially, this is kind of what I expected. I didn't expect a hard and fast answer on Triple BE because you have nativization, as I mentioned, you have nativization policies in China, which is a highly successful country. It's maybe now the strongest country in the world, both economically and militarily, and possibly with technology as well. So, look, if the Chinese can make it work, then this is in theory possible. Also, if you look at other places, I think, like the UK maybe has it, India maybe has it. So there are other countries who have these kinds of things. So it's not like it can't work indefinitely. But then there is also, many questions asked, like, is it a hindrance? And there's a lot of information or opinions out there that indicates that it may be. Now you may ask, like, okay, why does opinion matter? Even in a poll, if they're just doing like random polling in, a city, well, with regards to BBBEE, not every vote or every opinion is of equal value. The person who has been, who's like being totally cut out of the BBBEE thing, the hustler in the slum, he or she will be very bitter about this, being cut out. So they may be measured like in an opinion poll, but you don't really see the true damage that's being done to this person's life because they are not politically connected. It seems that BBBEE only works if you're politically connected. And then another person, which may be a very rich business person in South Africa, who has a lot of money to invest, he just feels the system is unfair. It slows him down economically, where for example, he could have just taken his money to Uganda and would not have had to deal with this. So these people's opinions, for example, these two extremes, the hustler and the important rich business person, are of a higher value to me than, let's say, someone who's just a middle class person and who works for someone else, because this doesn't matter whether you're black or white, because you're working for an employee and you're not rich, but you're not poor. So then the opinion matters less to me. But the people on the extreme sides, people who have lots of money to invest and people who have no money to invest, the hustlers, dying of poverty in the slums, they have many ideas though, and they have tenacity because they're hustlers. So you see, this is like what is not necessarily taken into account. Basically, there's no clear positive effect on GDP growth. Empirical studies, for example, Acemoglu et al., Erasmus in 2021, Creer in 2011, find no statistically significant impact of BEE or BBBEE policies on overall economic growth, GDP per capita, or productivity at the national level. The thesis from Erasmus in 2021 concludes that BEE was born out of profound national commitment to justice, equity, and redress, but it doesn't grow the economy. Then, with regards to investment, access to contracts and legitimacy. Firms compliant with BBBEE, and especially those achieving high scorecard levels, boost investor confidence and help with the share price. Then there's incentive-driven deals. Well-structured BEE transactions aligned with regulatory changes have shown positive value creation over time. Following the 2007 refinements to the Codes of Good Practice, compliance become positively correlated with returns. The drawbacks and the costs. High compliance costs. Research shows that firms spend about 1 to 3% of turnover on BBBEE compliance. And SMEs can spend up to 5 to 10%, which is so much extra money, which I feel is, wasted almost. Then there's a mixed impact on financial performance. Empirical reviews conclude that BBBEE has no clear effect or even a negative impact on investment, labor productivity, or profitability for many firms. From Reuters. Risk of deterrence. Complex BBBEE regulations overlook or can discourage foreign direct investment, with some multinationals lobbying for eased ownership rules and ease of regulation. So, conclusion on investment. While strategic BBBEE alignment can unlock contracts and reassure certain investors, the high administrative and financial burden, especially for SMEs, means that the overall effect on investment is neutral to slightly negative. And it's absent structural reforms and efficiency improvements. So, and then there's also the fact that there's your 30% ownership requirement. A lot of, especially I feel that South African investors are kind of over it. They understand the need for redistribution, and I think South African investors are less bothered by the fact that they just, if they go and look, if there's a profit to be made, then they will invest. However, the business plan still needs to look very good. Like, they're not going to throw away their money. Like, I have said it on many videos and I'll say it again. Rich people don't throw away their money. That's why they're rich. And governments need to appreciate this. Like, populist political parties need to appreciate this. And some rich people are so powerful. Like, if you annoy them, like, they'll either just leave the country and take their stuff with them, or remember, they don't necessarily have gold bars. Probably most of their wealth is already overseas, or it's tied up in such a way that you can't nationalize it. So that is the thing. And then overseas investors, let's say from Europe or Brazil, they just won't understand BBBEE, and because they won't understand it, they'll be like, okay, yeah, but why do we need to do this ownership thing? So this 30% joint ownership thing, and that may slow down investment. I think a lot of research needs to be done about this. Because the research I had, as I said earlier, there's not a lot of research papers with regards to BBBEE, which is shocking, because for me it's something that's very important. A lot more attention should be spent to this. So basically, investment, no growth. Like the genie, the Gini coefficient basically doesn't decline. The Gini coefficient doesn't go lower because without investment, you can't make the pie any bigger. And essentially, because it focuses on this industrialists, the trickle-down economics, the Gini coefficient is not like moved. And for me, this is the most important thing. In fact, it's the most important thing for most South Africans, is inequality. Because inequality is the root, for example, it may be it is the root to violence, not the only root, not the only root of violent crime, but it exacerbates it. Definitely, it's a contributing factor. And it's not just poverty, it's definitely inequality. So people who just want to create industrialists left, right, and center without tackling, and I'm not saying don't do it. You can create industrialists left, right, and center, but you still need to reduce the Gini coefficient, and the way to do that would be to enlarge the economic pie. And when you enlarge the economic pie, when you grow the economy, when you do like at the same time, you have redistributive policies like BBBEE, then you bring down the Gini coefficient. Next, let's have a look at the impact on economic growth. So, potential growth catalysts: redress and inclusion. BBBEE's objective is to diversify ownership, employment, and procurement channels that has facilitated incremental increases in black participation in formal enterprises. Industrial policy alignment focused on initiatives like the Black Industrialist Program, channel empowerment into productive sectors, potentially deepening industrial capabilities. So some limitations and challenges. There's negligible macroeconomic growth. Comprehensive evaluations by Acemoglu et al. In their 2007 paper and others found no statistically significant impact of BBBEE on GDP growth, reflecting offsetting interactions of compliance costs and limited productivity gains. Structural bottlenecks. South Africa suffered from premature deindustrialization, concentrated ownership, and barriers to entry that BBBEE alone has not overcome. So this is also very interesting. Like, remember, all that Acemoglu says is essentially, Acemoglu says, by the way, Acemoglu, you can go and read his book, Why Nations Fail. It's very interesting. But it doesn't have like a positive or negative impact. It doesn't have an impact. And Acemoglu is a very serious academic, by the way. Then SME strain and corruption. Basically, fronting is a big problem, and it breaks public trust. So this is another thing that I didn't mention. Is like, remember, BBBEE can only exist because of public trust. Once public trust breaks down the system, then it basically pollutes everything, including specifically the business world or business confidence. And then, people wouldn't want to invest in any case. And elite capture. Ownership gains have disproportionately benefited those with political financial capital, with limited trickle down to broader black populations. Though BBBE has introduced redistributionary structures and improved representation, there is little evidence it boosts aggregate economic growth. Its contribution remains marginal without targeted industrial policy, improved SME support, and robust governance reform. In summary, while BBBE has altered the appearance of ownership in control in parts of the South African economy, it has not yet catalyzed deep structural transformation. The persistence of economic power in established elites, the failure to expand productive capacity, and the lack of integration with industrial policy have limited the policy's redistributive potential. So, basically, it's very, it's very difficult to say that that BBBE has had a positive impact. It's easier to say that it has had a negative impact than a positive impact. And we can now see at least some black industrialists, and at the very least these people create, I would say, mostly positive examples to whom the population can look up to. And like maybe the black population in particular, but even the entire population can look up to them and say that, well, look, essentially these guys basically have pulled themselves up from their bootstraps. And they've pulled themselves up with from their bootstraps, and now they are these strongmen in society. So maybe then one can argue that this may be cause enough, that now we have broken, because remember, sorry, I'm going to mention apartheid again, but this video wouldn't have been possible without apartheid, because BBBE wouldn't exist without apartheid. So this is kind of a way to counter that negative balance, in the sense that, okay, at least now we have our dignity back. So from that perspective, I would say it has worked. And that's a good thing. Make no mistake, I think it's great that people have role models. Everyone should have role models. It's very good. But the thing is, South Africa is in such a bind that I believe the biggest problem is the Gini coefficient. For me, number one, I've made it clear in many videos, the inequality has to be brought down. And then secondly, the economic pie has to be grown, specifically through investment, because we don't have the money to do so by ourselves. So am I going to tell you whether BBBE is good or bad? Well, I can't, because, I just gave you some facts now about it, but I'm a white person. So to put it in perspective, I'm a white person. I don't benefit from BBBE. But then also I am not black and, disadvantaged. I'm not like a black guy who's struggling to get a business up and running. So it's not really for me to, I feel it's not really for me to say whether it's good or evil, these are big words. All I think is that best practice should be applied in a emergency situation, which is kind of what South Africa finds itself in for the last, 5 years, maybe 10 years. About 10 years. It's been an emergency situation, and it seems it's only getting worse. So if a country is experiencing these phenomena, then the time has come to make some big cuts. That's all for now. Please let me know about your thoughts on BBBEE. Try to make it philosophical, because I think it's not that easy to talk about or to think about it. So try to make your opinion heard, please do, but also do so in a way of trying to understand the other party or, the other schools of thought in BBBEE, that we can emerge with a good idea about it. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.